Okay, it's day 89, part 2. And a lot of folks have asked why I've been so mean to Steve Bannon, why I say he's an investment counselor for the Navy ever since he's been at Goldman Sachs, why I say he's been involved in Navy intelligence ever since he stopped being the director of, or the personal assistant to the Chief of Naval Operations. And if you've watched this series, I've traced his relationship to Scaramucci here. I call him just Mooch. So this Mooch and Bannon connection, Mooch to Bannon, Bannon to Mooch, goes back to the two Navy days, I believe, but at least to Goldman Sachs days. And it's all about what does the Navy buy the most of that none of the other services buy, which is nuclear fuel rods. And they buy highly enriched uranium. And who gets put in charge of highly enriched uranium but the FBI in 1998? So I look at 1998 and 1997 as a key watershed moment for the Clintons and their influence in terms of the Navy and using resources. That's why I say you could have a guy like Kwok here, who was ex-Chinese intelligence, who I believe was critical in passing nuclear secrets in one direction to the Chinese government and was critical in establishing a money laundering center in Macau in a casino for the drugs that were coming the other way, through LA, through the port of Long Beach primarily. But before we get to that and the kind of involved process here of trading drugs for weapons and then the uranium rat line or the uranium cover that goes with it, let me give a little bit of background about the uranium business since World War II in the United States to understand that. First thing to understand is the Chief of Naval Operations here. There's also the Secretary of Navy and then there's the Secretary of Marines. But the Chief of Naval Operations, who Steve Bannon worked for, would be a very high level clearance in the United States Armed Forces. And the person who works directly for them is this Director of Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program, the NNPP. Director of Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program. That is the biggest buyer of highly enriched uranium in the United States. The Navy by far is the major supplier. So if you just follow the money, it kind of takes you right to why this is such a critical spot and why everything seems to kind of center around this. If you've watched me before, you've seen this National Nuclear Security Administration that's over here on Maryland Avenue that I've gone to this weekend. And before that, it was inside that James Forstall building, the Department of Energy building, that I've done several shows in front of. If people don't remember, in 1999, the critical Wen Ho Lee spy scandal was all about giving nuclear secrets to China. And of course, yesterday, or actually maybe last night, another Chinese Lee was arrested, who has been here in Northern Virginia since 1994 and was just arrested trying to leave from Kennedy Airport. Now, what I'm saying is it was secrets going in the Chinese direction, but drugs coming back the other, primarily through the port of Long Beach. It might have shifted now to San Diego through the Navy and so forth, through Camp Pendleton and other machinations. But primarily it was, I believe, through the port of Long Beach in Los Angeles. Okay, that's why I still think, going back to why we have congressional offices in San Diego. Okay, so I'll just leave that right now for the imagination. But here's the key supplier for the Navy, which is Nuclear Fuel Services. Nuclear Fuel Services is in Irwin, Tennessee, and it reprocesses weapons-grade uranium for nuclear fuel, but it also was in the business of taking highly enriched uranium and making fuel rods out of that to do nuclear propulsion. So this is NFS is a very key supplier and now is a subsidiary of BWX Industries. Now, is that BWX also in Lynchburg, Virginia? Well, we'll get there. We're not quite sure yet, right? So let me give you the scythe, the nuclear scythe, if you will. This is my nuclear scythe, and it starts in Chalk River with the handle end of the scythe here. Goes down to Toronto, where we're going to recruit some key kids, spy kids for CICS, for our program. And then it's going to take a swing here out to Argonne National Laboratories in Palos Hills. This is where the atomic bomb, all the brain work was done, building those original pile reactors for the nuclear program. And then it's going to swing down here to U.S. Transcom. This U.S. Transcom is where all the transportation is organized for the U.S. Armed Forces. The Navy is got the blue water piece of this. The Army picks it up, and the Marines pick it up when it hits the shore, but the Navy has most of the blue water. If you remember, Blue Water Investments and Purple Shovels, Logan Hubbles, that association is Scaramucci, and it's going to be Bannon. Bannon's going to be the inside man. Scaramucci's always going to be the outside man throughout their careers. Metropolis here is where the yellow cake comes from. So if you have processing facilities out here with Cameco in Wyoming and Areva in Wyoming and so forth, they also have processing plants that don't do UF6. But if you're going to be taking Clive Bundy's stuff here from Nevada, and you're going to be getting stuff from Arizona from Jeff Flake, you're going to get yellow cake from Jeff Flake, you're going to get stuff from Moab and Clive, Utah here, and mines in this great Bear Ears part. You're going to go get some stuff from Idaho, etc. John Barrasso is going to give you some stuff from Wyoming. All of that yellow cake is, well, first the ore has to be reduced somewhere. I say the ore is being reduced somewhere near the southwest corner of Utah, near Moab and Clive, where there's two new waste processing facilities, and just north here in Henderson, near Henderson. Again, you want to go with places where you control the Senate. I'm leaning toward the Henderson side because of Harry Reid being such an influential person, and the whole Yucca Mountain proposal to bring everything there. It would just make sense that all nuclear waste going there to Yucca Mountain would also be all roads of uranium ore lead there. Now, where it's reduced with those Krupnik crushers, we don't know. You might want to put the Krupnik crusher as close to the railroad cars as possible before you sent the yellow cake down. The most efficient way to transport this is yellow cake. Now, you may want to have some of this yellow cake here in a facility in the southwest corner of New Mexico, for instance, near Los Alamos up here. Again, that's a facility that was controlled by Lockheed that then gets turned over to a company called U.S. Enrichment Corps. Okay, so we're going to move on to Metropolis. We're going to get our yellow cake here, and we're going to make UF6. We're going to put it into a cylinder, We're going to put it into a cylinder, so it makes the side shape really nice there. We're going to put it into a cylinder in Metropolis, and the people that are going to run that for us are not going to be Harris Corporation, but it's going to be Honeywell Corporation. Honeywell. Now, Harris may track it with its real-time view, exact view, but we're going to track it to Metropolis, and we're going to make those Mark Lambert famous UF6 cylinders out of it. In UF6 container cylinders out through the port of Charleston here to navies all over the world, to growing. If you have aspiring nuclear programs going toward the UAE or other Middle Eastern nations, you might just forget all about enriching the uranium and just keep sending it straight through the port of Charleston and send it right out on its way. But during the World War II, what happened is they enriched the uranium partially here, and then they enriched it even more in this place called Piketown, Ohio. If people aren't familiar with the series, this is where I was about 35 miles away from. There was 8 murders here in Piketown, Ohio. I was talking to 2 different informants there about 30 miles away in a town called Zanesville, trying to get information about this R&L trucking line that could be involved in this. There's the Saipov truckers now that we've learned about that seem to be coming from all sorts of places like Uzbekistan that are involved in trucking here. And you can see that almost Piketon is the scythe, is the stalk of corn or whatever that's getting scythed here by this nuclear scythe, I call it, okay? So a couple of other key points along the way here as we get to Piketon for our final enrichment. Now you'll notice also this facility up in Canada, and the reason why I mentioned it earlier, it's also a site of this Blind River processing facility. So if you did have a bunch of 550 tons from Saddam's yellow cake supply, and you shipped it up to Chalk River for some reason, you shipped it to Canada for some reason, you could use that as a supply of yellow cake and bring it down here into Piketon and make UF6 cylinders in Piketon. This, for a while, that's what they did here in Piketon, until later on they just did cylinder cleanup, and that capability moved here to Paducah, and then Paducah shut down, and now we do this processing, this gas diffusion processing, possibly in New Mexico, or possibly we have partners overseas that do it. But we're shutting down this capability in the U.S. to enrich our own uranium. We'll have to explore the motives of that a little bit later. But anyway, here at Irwin is where this NFS is, this Nuclear Fuel Services is. And this is where Oak Ridge, Tennessee, is where this Y-12 facility is, which is very famous from the atomic bomb project. And then here is an interesting little city called Clarksville. And this city is where Fort Campbell is, the 101st Airborne Division is in Fort Campbell in Clarksville. So you can see Oak Ridge here, you can see where Nashville is, you can see how close Clarksville is, and there's Paducah and Metropolis. Now there's U.S. Transcom. Now, the interesting thing about Clarksville is Peter Strokes starts his career with the FBI in Clarksville. Steve Bannon spends some time in Clarksville. The wife of Peter Strokes spends time here in Clarksville. Everyone seems to do their time in Clarksville, which is just kind of interesting because it's a place that really teaches people how to jump out of airplanes or get picked up out of airplanes. So I'll quickly go to a quick reminder of there's the uranium plant in Metropolis. Just a couple of proof points here. And I'll show you a quick extraction, what it's called. It's called a Fry's extraction, which is a... everyone keeps the ropes at an arm's length. They don't want the rope to tangle. There's a helicopter above, you can hear it. And there goes number one. Number two is coming up. Number three, you want to keep that rope out. You don't want to get that rope around your leg or around your neck. You want to walk along with the helicopter as long as you can, and you've just successfully done a rope insert and extraction. Now, what if you were selling uranium, and you were selling it in all parts of the world to all kinds of governments that shouldn't be buying it? You could learn rope extraction in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Now, here's Fort Benning in Georgia, but just higher there. He used to run the subs out of Pearl Harbor, right now where the Clintons are at the Four Seasons Hotel, owned by Waleed.